Okay, let's go around the league where Indy and I both have 3 items each. What's your first thing you want to talk about?
Oh, what a difference a year makes. When you talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, last year they won the division. They were ranked number 4 in total defense. And in the offseason, I thought they made all the right decisions. They brought in a T.O., who, by the way, is paying off. He's on his way to have another 1,000-yard season. He's ranked number 5 with all the receivers in the NFL, but they can't get it done. They're 2-10. Carson Palmer is having one of his worst years ever as far as quarterback rating goes, and he's been surrounded by weapons. You talk about Chad Ochocinco, University of Texas' own Jordan Shipley, T.O., Cedric Benson, a very good running back, and they can't get it done for some reason. So I just don't know what's happening there, but that year, that offseason, something happened negatively for the Cincinnati Bengals, and he might be fired at the end of this year when you talk about the head coach.
Well, he's gone because his contract's up. Now, I disagree. They had a good thing going in their dressing room. They bring in T.O. He's got now the T.O. Ochocinco show. They also bring in Antonio Bryant, another head case. Matt Jones, he'd been suspended for his credit card abuse. And I thought they brought in guys. Oh, and Pac-Man. You're bringing in all these combustible parts. They went from having a great dressing room to a terrible dressing room. And I think they got exactly what they deserved.
See, but the guys you mentioned, they weren't on the field. The guys that they
got
brought
rid of Bryant. Pac-Man was put on IR.
Matt Jones is gone.
But T.O. is taken away from Ochocinco.
That's hard to say. He's taking away, obviously, catches, but he's doing something with those takeaways. He's scoring touchdowns. He's getting a lot of yards.
I know you like T.O. You got his autograph when he came to Philadelphia, gave you one of his little hats. You told me that you got his hat.
Everyone got a hat. He put it in our locker. But I like guys that work hard, and you know what? He can stand to shut his mouth every once in a while, but I love the way he approaches the game. And since I went on the negative side, let me switch to a positive side when you talk about, what a difference a year makes. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they finished last in the division last year. They didn't do much in the offseason except for bringing Aaron Campman, who's on IR, and guess what? They're number 1 in the division. If they win out, they're going to win the AFC South, and they're going straight to the playoffs. And if that happens, Jack Del Rio needs to be considered Coach of the Year.
Okay, bad division. You think Del Rio should be considered for Coach of the Year?
With what he has and what he's doing with it, if they win out and if they end up winning the division,
there's a good chance they are.
I think he should be Coach of the Year.
To me, if you got Maurice Jones-Drew, you ought to be in a playoff contention every year. That guy's unbelievable. Now, I got a great stat for you. Peyton Manning threw 4 interceptions against the Cowboys. You know how many years it's taken him to throw 4 interceptions against the Texans?
No.
5. 5 years. He's thrown 4 interceptions against the Texans. He's thrown 4 in his last 2 games, 4 returned for touchdowns. And as I've watched him against the Cowboys, I'm thinking, Peyton, why did you never play like that against the Texans? He's always great. And I just couldn't believe it. I looked it up. In Gary Kubiak's career as head coach, he's thrown 4 interceptions. That boggles my mind.
Now, is it because the defensive backs or the Cowboys are that much better? I know there's some linebackers that had interceptions also, or is it because Peyton Manning just brings his A game to the Texans?
I don't know. I guess he brings his A game to the Texans because it's a division game. But even when he didn't have his players, all his starters this year, he still played great.
Well, you talk about division games and you talk about divisions. I want to talk about the NFC West. St. Louis right now is atop the NFC West. They're 6-6. So that means there's a team out there that might be 8-8 or even 7-9 that makes it to the playoffs, and it has people rethinking the playoff system. They want to. Some of the people are of the belief that if you don't have a winning record, regardless of whether you win the division or not, you shouldn't go to the playoffs. I disagree. I think if you do whatever it takes to win the division, regardless of your overall record, you deserve a chance to fight in the playoffs, because I think every division should be represented in the playoffs. And not only that, it makes the division games during the regular season that much more important, regardless of how bad your division is. If you're playing a division game, people within that division, fans within that division, are going to rally behind those games because they want to see their team, even if they're struggling, make it to the playoffs. So I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And right now, I don't think it's broke. And it's not like every year you're sending a team with an 8-8 record or 7-9 record to the playoffs. So, next people are going to be trying to bring the BCS system to the NFL. So they need to leave it the way it is.
That division is so bad. And you mentioned Del Rio's a candidate for Coach of the Year. If they had candidates for bad coaches of the year, Ken Wisenhunt and what he's had to work with after winning the division 2 years in a row, Now they're in last place. And a lot of it was their off-season moves. Of course, some because Bill Bidwell wouldn't spend money. But the Cardinals have just taken an unbelievable plunge into last place, and they are just terrible. And I was thinking what a waste it's been for Larry Fitzgerald, who, along with Andre Johnson and now I guess Roddy White, would be considered the 3 best receivers in the league. Now, I got Leslie Frazier. Leslie Frazier is going to be a head coach, and I think he's going to be a head coach of the Vikings. But after Tavares Jackson came in, threw 2 touchdown passes, and I know he threw 3 interceptions, but they were a different team with Brett Favre out. And Frazier says if Favre's healthy, he's going to start. I think he should stick with Jackson. If you don't want to be the coach who breaks Favre's streak, put him on injured reserve with a back injury. But I think they ought to go with Jackson. What do you think?
I think that's easier said than done. I believe everything you said is correct, but this is where the business aspect of the NFL comes into play. Right now, Leslie Frazier is working for Ziggy Wolf, the president of the owner, not the president,
He's
the
president
owner,
and owner.
the president and owner of the Minnesota Vikings, and he knows that Ziggy paid Brett Favre $18 million, so he has pressure on him to make sure that that investment's out there on the field and playing. And that's the part of the NFL I don't like, that you have to bring the business into your decision-making. And I just think that Leslie Frazier has a lot of pressure on him to put that high-priced quarterback on the field.
If he wants that job full-time. Now, Favre came back and wanted to go back in, but they said, we'll stick with Jackson because he started fast and he threw 3 interceptions, but they were just energized. And they were a different team. They looked like they did in 2009 when Favre was going so great.
And we talked about differences after a year. I mean, look at the Minnesota Vikings. They were a play away from the Super Bowl. And this year, they're having they're having a horrible season. So something's going on in these off seasons where people forget their winning ways. Speaking of winning ways and where they're not having it, Washington and Tennessee. I mean, these are teams that I've watched, and this is the first time in watching as a fan that I've actually seen teams give up, and you can notice it through the TV. Washington Redskins, some of the players right now are upset with the way Mike Shanahan's treating Albert Haynesworth, if you could believe somebody's actually upset with how Albert Haynesworth is being treated, but more importantly with what he did to Donovan McNabb, and it's starting to show on the field. You see guys make mistakes early, they're not tackling, they're not wrapping up, things that you do as a peewee football player they're not doing on the professional level, and I think some guys have given up on Mike Shanahan, and Daniel Snyder's going to have a decision to make.
I went on my weekly show in Nashville, and I said Andy Kalu said that he saw some players quit on the Titans, and Jeff Fisher came out and said, we have not quit. Now, my last NFL write-up is this. The Atlanta Falcons, I believe, are going to the Super Bowl. Why? Because they are the best team in the NFC. I think they're as good as any team in the AFC. They've won 6 in a row. They've won 15 in a row at home. So if they get the home field advantage at the Georgia Dome, they ought to win. And Matt Ryan, their quarterback, is 18-1 at home. And they just won their big road game against Tampa. It was the first of 3 consecutive games on the road. And we'll find out if they're the real deal. But I believe that the Atlanta Falcons are.